I just wish more people knew about this option because I kind of stumbled into it by accident. I had no idea that it would be cheaper for me to study abroad than to go to an in-state college, and I don't really see any other videos talking about it. My name is Alex Ray, and in this video we'll talk about why studying abroad was the best financial decision I ever made. I think when most people think about studying abroad, they have to decide whether the cost is worth the experience. In my case though, it was actually the financially smart decision to study abroad. I made this video because I really want more people to know about this option, especially high schoolers who are considering what college path to take. So to give you guys some background, I'm an American, and when I was a senior in high school, I was dead set on being a physics major in college. So I applied to something like 25 or 30 different public and private universities all across the US. But then halfway through my senior year, literally weeks after I had submitted all of my college applications, I had kind of a quarter-life crisis and dropped out of AP Physics and decided that I was going to be a psychology major. I know what you're thinking, in hindsight, not the smartest move, but it ultimately worked out for me. Anyway, all of the colleges that I applied to were very confused as to why I was applying as a physics major who dropped AP Physics in her last year of high school. Because I had committed so hard to the physics path initially and applied to physics-specific scholarships, it was too late to change my major declaration. I got into a lot of decent public and private universities, both in-state and out-of-state, but because of the physics psychology kerfuffle, I didn't get the financial aid or scholarship packages that I was hoping for. Basically, I messed up, and I was in panic mode trying to figure out what to do. I didn't want to take out mountains of debt just to get a bachelor's degree, but I knew I wanted to go to college. And I also knew I really wanted to study abroad at some point. But at this point, I had no idea if that would even be feasible because I was looking at so much debt just to go to college in the first place. It was around this time that I got a random flyer in the mail about a university in Wales. Just a quick note here because I learned very quickly during my time in Wales that many Americans don't know this. England is not Wales. Wales is not England. They, along with Scotland and Northern Ireland, make up the United Kingdom, which is its own independent country. The four regions themselves are also sort of countries on their own, but not exactly, so I can see where the confusion happens. But the point here is this: if you call a Welshman English, you will get kicked out of the pub. Anyway, I got a flyer in the mail about a Welsh university called Aberystwyth. This was not the university that I ended up attending, but it was what introduced me to the idea of doing my entire degree abroad. So rather than go to an American university and take out a bunch of debt and maybe get to study abroad for 1 or 2 semesters if I was lucky, I was looking at the opportunity to go and do my entire degree abroad for less overall than it would be to go to an in-state university. And if you don't believe me, because I definitely didn't believe it when I first looked into it, let me show you the numbers. Now, the numbers that I'm about to share are averages published by educational research bodies, but they're pretty close to what I was looking at when I was in high school. According to research by the College Board last year, the average tuition of a 4-year in-state American university is $10,440 per year, and the average room and board is about $11,510. So that's $21,950 per year, or about $88,000 for a total of 4 years if it takes you 4 years to do your bachelor's. Of course, if you have financial aid or scholarships, this number might look very different. But for the sake of the comparison, we're going to assume that you don't. Now let's compare that price tag to British universities. The first thing that you need to know is that bachelor degrees in the UK typically only take 3 years. And this is because you have to declare what degree you're pursuing when you apply. So from day one, you're taking classes that directly relate to your major. According to the Redden Survey of University Tuition Fees, the average yearly tuition for an international student pursuing a bachelor's degree in the UK is £12,000 per year. This number varies a bit by the degree program in the university that you're attending, but this is about average. In order to receive a visa, you'll need to have about £9,000 per year for living expenses. Additional fees to take into consideration are the visa application fee, which is £348, and the healthcare surcharge, which is £300 per year. Next, you'll have to consider the cost of flights. This is one expense that just really hurts to pay as a broke college student. I actually decided to skip coming home for Christmas one year, and it was the worst decision I ever made. We had almost a month off for Christmas break, so all my British friends went home, so I was pretty much all alone. Anyway, the point is, you'll probably want to come home at least twice a year, so that's roughly $2,000 per year. Maybe less if you live on the East Coast. So at the time of making this video, the conversion rate from pounds to US dollars is £1 for every $1.24. So if you convert everything from pounds to dollars, you're left with about $86,000. So even with the unfavorable exchange rates and the fairly conservative estimates, you're still slightly below the expected total for an in-state American university. But they are close enough that I would consider them equal, which is an amazing deal if you want to study abroad. But wait, there's more. The huge benefit of doing your entire degree in the UK instead of the US that often gets overlooked isn't just the tuition and the living expenses. It's the fact that you only take 3 years to do your degree instead of 4. That means that you can get into the workforce a whole year sooner and start earning experience a whole year ahead of your American peers. But more importantly, you're able to earn a whole year's worth of extra income. For example, let's say that you land a job after graduating where you're making $40,000 per year after tax. Let's assume that about half of that money goes towards living expenses, so you're left with about $20,000 you can save. That's $20,000 in your pocket that you would have otherwise not received if you had taken 4 years to do your degree instead of 3 years. I would argue that you should include this extra year of income in your analysis for the fairest comparison. That means rather than roughly $86,000 total, your true cost of acquiring that degree is $66,000. That's significantly lower than the expected cost of a 4-year in-state public American university. And you get the amazing experience of studying abroad, multiplied tenfold because you're able to live there for multiple years and not just a few months or a semester. And if that still sounds like a crazy price, because let's be honest, it definitely is, there's still ways to get that number down with scholarships, financial aid, and working part-time. And obviously there are other options to consider, like going to a local community college for 2 years and then switching to a state school, but I wanted to compare apples to apples as much as possible. Going to the UK for your degree is also a great option if you want to do a master's. It only takes 1 year to do a master's at British universities, whereas it takes 2 years in the US. So if you do both your bachelor's and master's in the UK, that only takes you 4 years instead of 6. Another financial benefit of attending university in the UK is that you typically don't need a car. I would say it's a lot less common for British students to own a car than American students, especially because the public transportation in the UK is so much more accessible. Towns are often so old that they were built long before cars were a thing, so they were built with pedestrians in mind. There's also an extensive train system that can get you all over the country or even to mainland Europe. You can also take really cheap flights with discount airlines like Ryanair if you want to spend a weekend in France or Spain or wherever else. This can actually be pretty affordable even on a college budget if you stay in places like hostels. The most expensive part of a European trip for an average American is the flights across the Atlantic. So if you're already in Europe, you really don't need to spend that much money to explore the continent. Finally, the degree itself is actually really valuable. If you want to stay in Europe after you graduate, having a British degree opens that door a lot more than if you had an American degree. If you want to return to the US, employers will probably find you really interesting because you have this worldly experience, but you're not an expensive visa hire because you probably have an American passport. There are some differences between British and American universities that I think are worth mentioning. I wouldn't say any of these differences are necessarily good or bad, it's just something to keep in mind. And these were just my experiences. I don't want to speak for all students who attended British universities. In fact, the university system in Scotland is actually more comparable to the US in a lot of ways. It's a 4-year degree, for instance. So if this is a path that you're considering, I would recommend sticking to England and Wales. First, the education system is a lot more independent. I studied psychology, so this might be different depending on your degree, but I really never had any homework or busy work. Usually, my only graded assignments for a class would be the midterm, the final, and maybe a couple projects or essays. I even had a few classes where the only grade was the final exam. Personally, I preferred this because it allowed me to understand and comprehend the material in my own way, and not just try and keep up with mountains of busy work. But some people need that structured environment to learn most effectively, so it really depends on the type of learner that you are. The other thing that shocked me about the grading system in the UK is that an A starts at around 70%, and a failing grade is about 40%. This doesn't really change too much in practice because professors tend to just grade on that scale, but it definitely made my heart skip a beat when I got a 65 on my first exam. Additionally, Greek life isn't a thing at all in the UK. I actually got asked multiple times if sororities and fraternities were even a real thing in the US, or if they just existed in movies. There are clubs and sports, but they're not focused on nearly as much as in American universities. The priority really is just the education, and everything else is secondary. So this means that there's more personal responsibility to shape the college experience into something that you want, rather than having counselors or peer guides giving you outlined schedules of what to do each day. Even the living situations are pretty different. I lived on campus in my first year, but it was really more like living at university-owned apartments. I lived in a 6-bedroom co-ed apartment with a full kitchen and living room. We each had our own bedroom, and that was another cultural difference that I noted. Most British students thought it was pretty strange that we would have a roommate and have to share a bedroom in our first year or two of college. There weren't any dining halls, which is why we had the full kitchen, which is something that I personally really loved because I was able to discover cooking for myself. and I guarantee you I saved a lot of money cooking for myself than if I had to use a mandatory expensive meal plan from the university dining hall. Finally, the partying and the nightlife is very different than I think the typical American college experience. The drinking age is 18, so pretty much everybody is able to legally drink by the time they reach university. At my university at least, that meant that we spent most of our weekend nights at pubs instead of house parties, because there was no concern about people having to sneak in or get caught with a fake ID. For someone like myself who was always really concerned about following the rules, this made me a lot more relaxed to socialize with my peers. It was definitely a culture shock though. Well, I remember arriving at my first week of orientation to find out that we were going on a university-sponsored pub crawl, followed by dancing at the university-owned nightclub. There are, of course, the obvious benefits of studying abroad. It was a really growing and maturing experience for me to immerse myself completely in another culture, and I don't think I would have gotten that benefit to the same extent if I only went for a semester or even 2 semesters. In the standard American study abroad programs, you're also typically grouped with other Americans, so it can be sometimes difficult to really feel like you're fully immersing. At my university, we had a lot of international students, but very few Americans. I think in my entire time there, I only met 2 or 3 other Americans, and so that really forced me to be friends with people from backgrounds that were completely different than mine. Ultimately, doing my entire degree abroad in the UK was the best personal and financial decision that I've ever made. I just wish more people knew about this option because I kind of stumbled into it by accident. I had no idea that it would be cheaper for me to study abroad than to go to an in-state college, and I don't really see any other videos talking about it. So that's why I made this video, to talk about my experience and hopefully inspire others to follow this path too. If you guys have any questions about my time as an American studying abroad in the UK, feel free to leave a comment below. There are a lot of things I didn't cover just for the sake of time, like visa requirements, the application process, and other fascinating cultural differences that I experienced. Like the time that I wanted to change from my sweatpants into my jeans, so I told my friends I'm gonna go change my pants, and they all looked at me like I had 2 heads. Apparently in the UK, pants means underwear, so I loudly announced that I had to change my underwear. Anyway, I hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you did, be sure to give it a thumbs up. I make videos like this on other personal finance topics every week, so be sure to hit that subscribe button if you want to stay up to date. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you guys next week.